Hello everybody, welcome to the Zoll update training video. The idea behind this video is to bridge the gap between users who are currently familiar with the 5.4 system, which is the system that we currently are utilizing, and to teach to the level of what the 6.2.2.3 system has to offer us. Since there are a number of changes that exist in this new software, we thought it important to develop a training video to help assist in bridging that gap. So a lot of the things are going to be similar or the exact same as they were in previous software. So the only thing this video is going to focus on is going to be the pertinent changes associated with the new Zoll 6.2 system. So the biggest difference with 6.2 is the fact that there is a new level of Nemesis data requirements. And Nemesis is simply the national database for EMS reporting. So they develop data dictionaries, one data dictionary, I should say, that is 770 pages long of information they deem to be important to the EMS world for data, research, patient care, etc. So this will be the third revision of that data since it's been in existence in the early 2000s. What you'll notice is that a lot of things from a terminology standpoint are different than they used to be. So there's also roughly 67 new data elements that are required on the state and national level. Now, a lot of these are occurring in the background of the program where we really cannot see as we're completing them, but some are going to require input from you as the end user to complete your report. If we start here, when we open the program, the login is no different. Creating a crew is no different, but what you'll notice is there's a couple of new fields on here that we must complete in order to assign a crew to a vehicle. So we'll click through and get the data input so we can get to these sections here. When I get to level of care of this unit, a lot of these lists were much more inclusive previously, and at the system level we pared them down to kind of more or less what mirrors what we do in the system. So all our units are ALS, right? We have ALS transport and ALS non-transport vehicles. We'll pick our call sign for the vehicle we're assigned to. So today, let's say we're Medic 13. Now it automatically is linked to the vehicle here in the background of the program, so it's going to pick vehicle number for you. The primary role of Medic 13 is we are a transport vehicle. The software is automatically going to pick my member level for me. Since again in the background it is mapped as such, it automatically knows that I'm a paramedic, so it puts me in there as such. So we're going to set as current. Now, no different than before, when we get a dispatch run, we're going to request it up and begin our reporting. Right away, we notice that the EMS system name here is a required field. It's already defaulted to Edward Hospital as our EMS system. A lot of things that were defaulted before are defaulted once again. There's certain new fields that are also defaulted, and there are actually old fields that used to be defaulted that we can no longer default. So while it's not new to us, it's new to us to fill out because we no longer have the ability in the background of the program to default those selections. This additional response mode descriptor simply refers to our traveling to the call. Now I understand we already put response mode in there, but they want to know if there's anything else we did on the way to the call. If nothing applies, simply click something that mirrors your response mode here, so lights and sirens. Previously, we used to have two different types of time sets in the report. One would come up under the trip tab here, the other one would come up under the outcome tab. We now have time of injury onset that shows up under the trip tab, which used to be exclusively under the outcome tab. It's nice because these two time sets now mirror each other. You'll also notice that we have this thing called PSAP call, which used to be termed dispatch notified for us. So same thing, they just term it PSAP call. Now, one additional time that we have to enter is destination transfer of care. So this is a new one where they want us to put in what time we handed off patient care to the either nurse or doctor at the hospital. This initial patient acuity, they simply just want to know, is this a critical patient? Was this a low acuity patient? Was the emergent? And it's not just for trauma patients. They want to know any type of patient. So medical, whatever. They want to know in your opinion, what was the acuity level of the patient. If we select dead without resuscitation efforts, we're only going to utilize that anytime we don't transport a person. So if it's a 000 on scene, we'll utilize dead without resuscitation efforts for this individual. EMS was first unit on scene. We must fill out this one too, another required field. A little bit of a nomenclature change down here for additional crew on scene. It used to be firefighter, paramedic, and driver. Now we just call it officer and caregiver 1 and caregiver 2. The first responder tab. This is an optional field to use or tab to use, but what it allows you to do is almost creates a cheat sheet within the program for entering some basic information. So when I click on this, all the way on the right side of the screen, you can see it opens up these additional tabs I can click on. Now, if I click on the arrow of subjective, it opens up another one that gives me chief complaints, past medical history, allergies, and medications. So what it allows me to do is just document those items, vital signs, if I want to put an outcome in, and if I want to put a narrative in there. So it allows me to put in what we're doing on the scene in terms of vital signs, what we've obtained, any history, medications, etc. And when you enter them into the patient care report under the first responder tab, it actually automatically puts them into the corresponding tabs throughout the report. So you don't have to be on scene tabbing through a bunch of different windows or fields under different tabs to get to them. You can just put it all within this first responder tab, and it'll place itself appropriately within your report. So for instance, we'll go back to chief complaint. We'll pick abdominal pain. Now it's going to populate whether you pick a chief complaint here or under your patient assessment or history. It's going to bring up a window where it wants you to put in the duration. You don't have to. You can click OK to get out of that screen. Moving along to the patient tab. You'll notice these no smoking signs or these not applicable values or Ghostbuster symbols, whatever you want to call it. They've been called many different things. But these allow us to document pertinent negatives for things or unable or refused, not applicable. So if you have an individual who's a John Doe for us, we can simply put unable to be completed, or an individual who refuses to give you their information, we can also select that and put that in the fields. You'll see these no smoking symbols pop up all throughout the report in different areas, and they become useful for documenting. Patient resides in service area. Essentially, does the person live in your town? They live within an area you respond. Now you can see because we access chief complaint, past history, medications, and allergies through our first responder tab, it automatically input that information into here in this part of the patient history tab of our report. If there's an injury that was involved, we'll document or cause an injury as we have in the past. You'll notice it's a much more inclusive list that is now separated by type. Our past medical history is also a more inclusive list than it used to be, so we can more accurately document certain things with our patients. And you'll notice when we click through medications and allergies, these lists are even longer as well. Medications is about 5 times longer than the previous list was. Because it's longer, it takes a little more time to load. One enhancement to the 6.2 software is the ability to search any item within a word or phrase. So for instance, we can see that I have albumin human right here as a medication option. But I can start typing in human and it'll pull up from within the context of the actual medication itself. It also shows us the ones we've currently selected. Previously, it used to search just based upon the beginning statement of what we entered, but now it'll search within the context itself of each applicable field. So when I type in ACE, I get all these different medications that have ACE somewhere within the phrase itself. And that goes for any type of category that's searchable, not just medications. Under our allergies, they've been grouped into medications, medication group, and environmental/food for us to document. If your patient has no known allergies, you can go down to the left-hand corner of the screen and click NKA, and it'll document as such. The chief complaints section. Previously, we used to be able to utilize not applicable for anatomical location and organ system. If a patient was unresponsive, they couldn't verbalize any chief complaint, so therefore we can put not applicable. Unfortunately, state rules no longer allow for this, so even if the patient can't verbalize something, we still must select something that's pertinent to our patient. So do the best you can to match this up to perhaps what the primary symptom is or what your patient is experiencing. Under the Patient Assessment tab, one thing that's made life a little bit easier when reporting or documenting is this within normal limits button at the bottom. So we can document each category as within normal limits should we have somebody transported who was within normal limits of that selected category. So as we go through and perhaps they're ANO times 2 like we selected, but everything else was within normal limits. The Protocol tab. This is a new addition as well. Unfortunately, it's not something we can simply use not applicable on. That won't work. The state wants to know essentially what were you treating for. So it's a national/state Nemesis data requirement that they want to know what we are treating for. You'll notice none of these mirror anything from Region 8 per se in terms of what we do from a protocol standpoint, but do the best you can to match up kind of what it is we did for that patient or kind of what we were thinking in terms of treatment to help satisfy that data requirement. Make sure you're picking the time and also the age category. Those are both required entries. Under the ETOH/drug usage, this used to default to not applicable or none, but now we must fill it in manually. This list here shows us a bunch of things in terms of drugs and alcohol. If there was none suspected or none reported, you can simply click down here at the not symbol and put none reported. They want to know if it was cardiac arrest, even if you didn't treat one. So if you did not treat a cardiac arrest, select no. If you did, put yes and fill out the appropriate categories. So since we accessed vital signs under the first responder tab, it actually added one on, even though we didn't put any information in, it still added in a set of vital signs here for us, or at least started one. Under cardiac rhythm, they're going to want to know the method of interpretation, whether it was computer or manual. Most of the time it's going to be us looking at it, should be all the time us looking at it, doing manual interpretation. EKG type, what did we utilize to obtain this? Was it a 12 lead or a 4 lead? Under stroke scale type, we put Cincinnati in here, and this list for the stroke scale is going to say negative, positive, or non-conclusive. Now, we've taught for years that negative and positive are not the correct nomenclature for a Cincinnati stroke scale assessment, that it should be abnormal and normal. However, when we changed that in the background of the program, it created errors in terms of state rules. They didn't like that, so they wanted to reflect negative and positive. So for us, we're stuck with what the Nemesis requirements are for stroke scale in terms of negative and positive, unfortunately, at this time. So negative being a normal stroke scale and positive findings being an abnormal stroke scale. So under interventions, a lot of these things used to be pre-populated or automatically filled out when we added it. So certain things like prior to arrival, number of attempts, successful, and authorized by used to be things that were pre-populated by the system. And unfortunately, we can't do that anymore. The system will not allow us. So we must ensure that we're going through and filling out each of these things for all the procedures we do. Now, while it doesn't add that much additional time, you'll notice that there's certain things you forgot to put in there that were previously defaulted. So as you're doing your error checking later on, when you complete your PCR, you'll probably notice in the beginning that a lot of the errors are related to interventions and certain fields that were missed under this category. You'll notice under the Outcome tab for disposition, transport, and drop-off that there's a lot of new categories that will have to be filled out to complete the report. Certain things are defaulted to not known. Certain lists are completely removed, and the only option to put in is unknown. But Nemesis is requiring us to put what the emergency department disposition was on this patient. So what happened to them when you drop them off? Well, a lot of the times we're not going to know that. They also want to know what the eventual hospital disposition is. Again, we're not going to know what happened to the patient in the hospital since we're only spending a short amount of time there. Down at the bottom, the hospital inpatient destination, where do they end up in the hospital? Again, we're not going to know. So a lot of these things we try to default and make simple lists to choose from because of the fact we're just not going to know. So as you go through, make sure we're completing those as appropriate. Again, the transport mode descriptors, just like our response mode descriptors, they want additional information as to how we responded from the scene to the hospital. You'll notice right now we have hospital designation defaulted to hospital, as well as hospital inpatient destination defaulted to unknown. Now when I click Edward Hospital as my drop-off destination, you'll see that these two will clear out and we got to pick them once again. Just pick hospital general for any place you might transport to. If we're obtaining a refusal, one thing that's been done to make it easier on the end user side is there's been a combination of refusal forms and HIPAAs. So it makes it simpler to get just one signature for both your refusal and your HIPAA on the same form. And you don't have to do two of them for your refusal patients, which is nice. Under signatures, we have exposures, and the state would like us to document exposures on scene, and this doesn't necessarily mean for anybody who was exposed. They want us to complete this regardless. So what this means is even if nobody was exposed on your call, you still must document that nobody was exposed. So the easiest way to do this is it's already pre-populated with no under suspected exposure, injury, or death. For your personnel, just pick your charge medic, and exposure type will be defaulted to none. Under the review tab, when we go to crew, we got to make sure that we click protective equipment used and select what we use in the call to protect ourselves from a PPE standpoint. That's another item that used to be pre-populated but now must be selected. Once we've completed our report, just like before, we're going to click complete PCR at the bottom, then bring up a bunch of boxes and windows that tell you it's running the rules against it. Previously, when you click complete PCR, it would run a set of rules in the background against all the data you've input into your report. Now when we do it, it's going to run all the state, national, and system rules against it, which it normally didn't do before. So these are all built into the software of the program, and it validates that report prior to even completing it at the hospital. You'll notice that down at the bottom of my screen, after I clicked complete PCR, it gave me like a red ribbon. And what that's allowing me to do at the bottom is it's showing me all my errors of what isn't correct in my report. It says state rule, 1 of 8. So I have 8 rules that I have violated that I need to correct. So the nice thing about this as compared to the old system is I can have my errors at the bottom here, and I can still click through my tabs to correct what the errors are. Previously, you used to be able to just look at your errors and then go back into your report and complete them, and then run the complete report again to see what errors you had left. Now we can just tab through our errors here, see what they all are, while continuing to work through our report and mitigate those errors. So we'll start at the beginning here. So when I click the rule, it tells me that my date/time of symptom onset/normal must be less than or equal to unit back in service time or date. So it's telling me two different things, that my symptom onset is off or my back in service date time is off. So when I clicked on the top one here into my affected fields under time of injury onset, that's going to take me to my times field. And what I notice here at the bottom is that my in-service time is way off by 2 years. So I'm going to correct that by clicking it and making it the correct time. So now it's within chronological order because my in-service time actually came well before my injury onset time. So now I can tab to the next error. I can bring up the information on it. So this says date/time of vital signs taken must be less than or equal to unit back in service time. So this is applying to the same thing. So the fact that my in-service from my unit here was off considerably, it's affecting a bunch of different rules. So I click to the next one, same thing. Procedure performed must be less than or equal to back in service time. So all these are affected. So what I can do to clear out these errors is simply hit the refresh button here, and anything pertaining to that in-service time that was creating errors will then be cleared. So I got 2 rules left that I'm violating. So this is telling me work-related illness or injury must equal a valid value other than a not value when incident blah, 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 blah. Now when you read these rules, these are direct from the states. The state has worded these and they've kind of put the information in there as to what they're looking for. They can be rather confusing though when trying to interpret what they say. So if you break it down, really all you got to worry about is the first half of what the rule is telling you. So work-related illness/injury must equal a valid value other than a not value. That's really all I care about right now to complete this rule. Everything after that is pretty much the why. The first part is the what, the second half is the why. And when it says, anytime an error says must equal a valid value other than a not value, it's telling you it's blank or you put in a not applicable that it doesn't like. What this rule is telling me is that work-related illness or injury is blank right now, which is required to be filled out to complete this run. Now, I don't see anything in here in my affected fields that pertains to work-related illness or injury, so I'm not going to find anyone there. So I'll click cancel. Under patient and under billing is where I'm going to find work-related. We used to skip over billing, but now we must fill out whether or not this was a work-related issue. That used to be defaulted, but for us, unfortunately, we cannot do that anymore. So since the only rule I had left was a yellow rule, which is an optional rule or a warning, it allows me to complete my report. So it could be something that isn't required like the red ones are to complete it, but it's telling me something isn't right and I might want to mitigate that before I do so. And the error refers to my procedure, which falls outside the actual time frame of the call. So we'll correct that real quick. No different than before, once we've satisfied all the rules, we click complete PCR or the little refresh button on our rule bar and allow ourselves to complete the report just like we would in the old system. So something else that's new for documenting refusals is the state of Illinois wants us to put a lot of these fields as not applicable. So patient condition at destination, not applicable. Transport priority, not applicable. Transport method, transport delay, destination reason, hospital designation, and then down at the bottom, destination facility type should also be termed as not applicable. Now we can find these not applicable when we click on the field itself. It has the little no smoking sign at the bottom. Click that and it'll change the field to not applicable. But all these must be filled out and completed in order to complete a refusal in the new system. So that's pretty much it for the training video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, reach out to your EMS system coordinator for your department and they can relay those on to us at the system level. We can address them accordingly. But we look forward to feedback and anything else we can do to make the system better. Thanks. Take care.